We talk a lot about mental health here on the Celebrate Kids podcast. And in our daily segment, Facing the Dark, today we're going to look at New York Governor Kathy Hochul's reframing of how she thinks her state should approach the mental health crisis in caring for teens. Dr. Kathy thinks that there's some really insightful approaches here, and it might be something that gives us clarity and confidence, and maybe even courage to lead well in this cultural moment. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark, be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, New York Governor Kathy Hochul has a $1 billion plan to support youth mental health, which includes more mental health professionals in schools. And she says that it's not just one counselor for a school with 700 kids, that they need to actually have an environment free from the fear of gun violence, which has become the leading cause of death for children and teens, she kind of cites. She also goes on to say that schools need training to discuss the power of social media and its impact on mental health in smart and thoughtful ways. She closes her kind of speech on this saying, quote, "These should include measures to stop social media from prying on our kids and reduce its influence on mental health, embed professionals in the communities most heavily impacted by the crisis," which she kind of later on cites the LGBTQ community, Black and Latino communities. And then she goes on to kind of close out by saying, and we need to invest in nation-leading mental health research programs to help inform future policy decisions. Now, Dr. Kathy, I really appreciate this perspective. And I'm going to tell you, it's partly because of the fact that she says that there's not just a formula like 1 in 700, but that the challenge in mental health right now might actually be environmental. What are your thoughts on kind of how she phrases this and shapes this whole kind of issue on how to approach mental health with teens?
I agree with you that it's tragic when we have a locked in mathematical formula. Somebody had to establish something for budgetary purposes. I get that. However, there are some children in some schools at greater risk of mental health than in others. And we need to recognize that. I don't think that that's inappropriate to designate dollars according to need. And data would suggest how much need exists here and there, depending upon, again, the climate of the neighborhood, the types of students who are there, and all of that. The other thing that I would say is I would love to see more counselors in the elementary school. I think often what I find is the dollars are spent at the middle school, high school level. I understand that. That's where suicidal ideology shows up. That's where cutting drugs, alcohol, cutting school, racism, hate, those kinds of things are often more explicitly noticed. And so that's where we put our dollars. But what if we invested in the preventative side of things and made sure that we had more guidance counselors who did small group work about emotions and self-control and, so many other things, the definitions, if you will, of right and wrong and good and evil. That would be intriguing to me to see what would happen if some districts would do that and reallocating the money.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, Chuck Colson once said that Harvard isn't able to teach business ethics because essentially they think that business ethics is taught in one class and not something that's kind of permeated throughout the entire, business program or whatever program you're kind of referencing. So within that framework, what do you think are the things inside of our culture that reveal that maybe we're not totally conscious of mental health? It seems like sometimes our solutions or approach to this might be the same as Harvard's approach was to ethics, just to offer some people who are kind of experts and have them kind of engage in these different aspects. What kind of needs to change in our society to bolster mental health in the support of our kids?
I had never heard that Chuck Colson quote before. That's really interesting. Yeah, you can't teach business ethics in one class and expect it to permeate. And I can see why you're drawing that analogy. We can't have one guidance counselor teach one small group and expect that that's going to, change the life of a kid or whatever. So what needs to happen? Again, in investing people and resources when children are younger before it looks like they need mental health support. We have intellectual health, social health, emotional health, physical health, and spiritual health. And the whole community ought to be doing all of it. It's not just the school's job. So that concerns me too. Where are the resources in our churches? Where are the resources in our after-school clubs? Where are the resources in our divorce recovery and our, all the kinds of things that are going on in the mess of our chaotic culture? So that would be an insight I would bring to the table. Where else should we be spending money on mental health? How early should we start it? Assuming that if we don't invest in our children today, their tomorrows will be very different. There is a program, Wayne, that's very exciting at the American Association of Christian Counselors. It's aacc.net. And you can become a mental health coach. This is not for psychologists and professional therapists and counselors. This is for lay leaders, pastors, moms and dads, school teachers, whomever wants to have a handle on mental health. And what they teach in this program that I think is so outstanding is how you can recognize that somebody might be on the edge, how you respond appropriately when you figure out that they might be, and how you can refer them to the right kind of help that they would need. This is what I want more of. Regular people who have their eyes and ears open to look for the lonely, to look for the downcast, to look for the ones who are ostracized, and see if we can do something for them.
Yeah, I love that program. And it's really practical. And maybe you could help me think through some other practical things, especially for moms and dads. What kind of environmental or social relational things do parents need to highlight in our homes to help support the mental health of our own kids?
The first thing that comes to mind is to slow down and quiet down. We don't have to rush. We don't have to do everything. Talking about whether we're talking about summer or we're talking about the academic school year, there's this tendency, let's do soccer and Spanish and ballet and piano and youth group and choir and let's volunteer. And there's a place for a lot of things. I like to recommend that you'll never find out if you have a pianist until you give them a year of piano lessons. So I'm a huge fan of exposing kids to as many opportunities as possible to discover where their talents and joys might lie, but they don't have to continue doing it all forever and ever. We don't have to rush around. One of the great benefits of the COVID crisis was that we stayed home. Kids had regular nap times. Kids ate less fast food. They had a more regular wake up and go to bed schedule, and so did adults. And all of that was very good for our mental health. So slow down, quiet down, get our buds out of the ear, turn off the music and the movies, and just sit in the silence. Because you know what, Wayne? If we and our children cannot be comfortable with our own thoughts, if we always run from them and fill our brain with somebody else's thoughts, we're in trouble. So there's a place for quiet. Wisdom rises when we're quiet. And there's a place to slow down. I think both of those would be good for anybody who's already struggling with mental health issues and those who don't ever want to struggle.
There's something about when Dr. Kathy told us to quiet down and slow down that made me think of this passage out of 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 14. And this is what's written. Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord had tormented him. Saul's attendants said to him, See, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play the lyre. He will play when the evil spirit from God comes on you, and you will feel better. So Saul said to his attendants, Find someone who plays well and bring him to me. One of the servants answered, I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is fine looking, and the Lord is with him. Then Saul sent his messengers to Jesse and said, Send me your son David, who is with the sheep. So Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, a young goat, and sent them with his son David to Saul. David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of the armor bearers. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, Allow David to remain in my service, for I am well pleased with him. Whenever the Spirit of God came on Saul, David would take up his lyre and play. Then relief would come to Saul, and he would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. That's a long passage to read today on a Friday, but I think that there's something special in here that kind of reflects what Dr. Kathy's talking about with quieting down and slowing down. Now, I do believe that God was working in unique ways in what David was doing. And this passage comes in a time and a place and a history that might not be prescriptive for what we're going through right now with a mental health crisis with teens and maybe even with adults. But I do think that there are some lessons to take from this. To recognize that the mental health challenges that we look at today are not new, and also that there is a physical and a spiritual aspect to them. And we see that clearly as what's played out here with Saul. And so leaning into the advice and the wisdom from Dr. Kathy and from others in the Christian community, I believe can be really helpful in this time and this place. And I hope that's an encouragement for you as you look forward to the weekend. And as a note, Dr. Kathy is talking a lot about mental health right now, especially on our weekend edition of the Celebrate Kids podcast, where we look at what Dr. Kathy says. I want to encourage you to tune in tomorrow to hear some more thoughts from Dr. Kathy on mental health and how we can live well in this cultural moment. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook and the rest of us here at the Celebrate Kids team, my name is Wayne Stender, and I want to say thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here again on Monday.